Hello everybody, how's everybody doing? Merry Christmas for those who celebrate it. I come from an atheist background. My family was militant, they were militant atheists, and we always celebrated Christmas and Easter. Not for religious reasons for sure. We just, end of the year kind of stuff, celebrations, nothing wrong with that, as far as I'm concerned at least. We still do celebrate in my family. Anyways, Merry Christmas, and for those of you who won't see me next time, Happy New Year as well. I want to recap a little bit of the main points that I've been trying to make in the Extinction series. Okay, and here you go. See if we can get it up there here. And these are the main points. We have what I call Extinction 101, and that means that you must first explain in an extinction theory how actual extinctions occurred. In other words, we had animals in the past, not only the dinosaurs, which are the most famous, but we had synapsids, we had amphibians, we had archosaurs, we had all kinds of animals in the past. And they're no longer around. We see their bones in the rock. You measure the rock, you get an idea how old that layer is, and you get an idea of when those animals were around. And there's been all these layers throughout our history, history of life on Earth, and we had all these animals there. They're no longer around. And they were different types of animals. By doing bone analysis, you can tell. Okay, they were quite different. And so you need to explain how they disappeared first before you can talk about the extinction of man. Why? Because I'm saying a man is an animal. He belongs to the animal kingdom. Okay, just as simple as that. And so as a general rule of thumb, it'd be nice if we know how the animals in the past died, whatever it was, and see if we can escape whatever mechanism, claim their lives. So if we cannot escape it with our intelligence, with our technology, with our foresight, and all the other good things that Mother Nature gave us, then we're going to die in the same way. That's why we need to do Extinction 101 first. Okay? People like to jump, skip, and go directly into man. They're experts in man. Well, one fellow did criticize some things regarding Extinction 101, so I'm going to be addressing his comments today. Okay, and I've addressed some of those the other day as well, some of his comments, because he's the only one really that is trying to at least address the issue, okay, whether right or wrong. I'm saying that all these animals died because of their food chain disappeared. What we have is a chronological disappearance of animals. In other words, specifically of food chains. It is the old food chain that disappeared and a new one took over. That's what a mass extinction is. It claims a food chain. And unfortunately, none of the paleontologists have ever discovered that. So I don't know about their level of education or their level of intelligence if they haven't figured that out in 200 years that we've had paleontology. So I don't consider any of them paleontologists. A paleontologist is not a guy who goes out in the field, collects bones, gives them a fancy name, and assembles them in a museum. That's a stamp collector. That's not a paleontologist. Paleontologist is a forensic investigator. He has to figure out what the crime was, how the animal died. He's, I call him a necrologist. He studies death. That's what they do. Okay? They study death. They have to tell us, that's the job of a paleontologist, to tell you how the animals died. Yeah, hello. Anyways, I say that animals in the past, the primary mechanism was starvation, and that's the cookie cutter. No species can eventually, given enough time, escape starvation. Why? Because what disappears are the plants underneath their feet. The plants that fed the herbivores on which the carnivores depended, and of course carnivores depend on other carnivores as well, right? But that whole pyramid disappears. Why? Because the bottom level disappears. What disappears is are the plants that the herbivores ate. And I call it the ecological pyramid overturn. The pyramid overturns. You have the many carnivores chasing after the fewer and fewer herbivores, which chase after fewer and fewer plants. That's essentially the mechanism. Okay? It's the overturning of the ecological pyramid. You have the trophic levels invert. Okay? So, and starvation explains selectivity, especially it explains why a food chain disappears and another one doesn't. Another one continues. Most famous case, the dinosaurs disappeared. They ate conifers. We came along, we were eating angiosperms, and so we didn't even notice their disappearance almost. I mean, they were gone, and we said, oh, we have freedom now, free at last, you know, and started radiating. And that's chronological extinction, no doubt. Famine can also be applied to any habitat or climate. Okay, plants undergo cycles. People are not aware of that. People think that plants live forever. They don't. Not species. Even orders in higher levels, you know, don't last forever. What happens to them? They lose their genetic diversity, and their population pyramid also overturns. When? Not if, but when it overturns, the animals, the herbivores that depended on that source of food, go with it. They can't change at the last moment and say, well, instead of, you know, like a rabbit eats lettuce, maybe carrots, Bugs Bunny, right? He can't at the last moment change and switch over to pine leaves. Okay? It doesn't happen. And so that animal dies when the lettuce and the carrots disappear. And that's exactly the mechanism I explained. And I'm saying man cannot avoid that same exact cookie cutter, that same exact process, those causes. When plants disappear, man disappears. And you say, well, why will plants disappear? We grow them every day. Well, in our special case, we grow them for money. So we have this abstraction we call trade. We have commerce. We give money, essentially. We might give some other good, but in general it's money. We transfer money to someone, and that someone gives value to that money. For him that's important because he can do something with it later, and so he gives you food for it. And the question is whether that the day that flow of money stops, right? Whether anyone has any incentive to produce and distribute food to the cities, to you. Okay, and I'm saying the global economy cannot exist forever, cannot continue to grow forever. At some point, it collapses, it crashes. What I mean by that is money is no more. People no longer believe in money. People no longer accept money. We have tons of unemployment at that point in time. There are several factors that occur. I'm not going to go into detail with that right now. And the issue is that once that happens, nobody has any incentive to produce, to plant food, to plant seeds or whatever, grow food, or distribute it to the cities. And billions die in a matter of weeks. So I think we die the same way the animals died, when our food sources disappear. What is interesting is that no one has come up with a theory involving food. Starvation. We have all kinds of theories out there except that one. Nobody's thinking about that. That humans can die because of food. Okay, everybody's thinking of asteroids and disease and climate change and other nonsense that has nothing to do at all with extinction, but that's what people believe. That's what's in the news. Anyways, what we have here is also the issue of whether humans are part of the animal kingdom. That's an issue. That's an issue because all these folk, they say, look, humans are animals, but they're not. We're not animals. So are we animals or are we not animals? And so we have to use the word animal consistently, okay? And this is the classification that we find, at least in the Wikipedia. I think all biologists will agree with this. Just about every individual out there mostly agrees with this. We belong to the animal kingdom, whether you like it or not. You're an animal. You know, hopefully you have blood running through your veins. You breathe, you know, you sleep, you eat, right? We belong to the special, you know, subcategory. We'll just call them subcategories. We don't need to know these in any scientific way. These are subcategories. We're part of the mammals, we're part of the hominids, and we're within that part of the hominins. Okay, so that's our classification. Anyone who wants to challenge that should take it up with with the biologists. I'm not going to talk about that. I think we are animals. We belong to the animal kingdom, and he who doesn't like it can go to another planet and you know, become a plant or a rock or whatever. Well, because of that, you know, we suffer the same type of problems that animals suffer, and this is one of them. And that is that, just like it occurred with other animals in the past, our population will decline eventually. We will reach zero population growth. Right now it's predicted to happen around mid-century, this century, the 21st century. So around mid-century, we're going to reach zero population if everything continues as it is going right now. I believe we're going to reach that point much sooner than mid-century, a few years before that, but that's my take on that. And why? Because we're producing fewer babies. There's no chance of producing babies today because people have moved from the country to the cities, okay? And because of that transition that's still going out there, even in poor countries, you know, everybody's moving to the cities. The land is being bought out by the big agricultural corporations, and they plant food and distribute it to the cities where people are living. So that's the transition that's going on right now. And what I'm saying is this graph tells us a lot, and it tells us something about this next graph, which is the population curve for any species. Okay, I'm saying all species follow this curve, whether they like it or not, including so-called non-animal man, non-animal humans. We start out a long time ago with a very sharp new population pyramid. Births are high, so are deaths. Then we, after a long period, we reach finally, you know, we're in this nomadic phase. We eventually reach a region where we don't colonize anymore. You know, humans are no longer colonizing the earth. And what happens at that point, we become sedentary. And at that point, births exceed deaths primarily because we get used to the endemic diseases in the region. And that's not only for man, that's for any animal. Once they migrate and they stay in a region for a long time, they finally, over the hundreds of years or decades, they finally get used to many of the diseases that afflicted their parents, their ancestors. And what happens at that point, the births now go up. In general, at least for humans, it does. Deaths go down because you know, we finally conquered disease in some way. In our case, we also made our living conditions much better, etc. And someone can introduce vaccines also. For those who believe in vaccines as well, you know. Then at some point, you know, the population pyramid starts overturning because the births go down and the deaths goes up. And the reason for this also is, you know, you like I give the example, you can put a little piece of bread on your table and leave it there for a week or whatever, and you'll see that it turns green. And the bacteria, you know, they multiply on that piece of bread, but at some point their population pyramid overturns. They stop reproducing exponentially. And that's what's happening to man. And right now, yeah, the births are going down, the deaths are going to go up. They're going to cross, the curves are going to cross, and at some point the births are really going to go down. Nobody's going to produce children, and all the old folks are going to die, and that's when the population pyramid overturns. And so we are undergoing this process as we speak. You may be there where I show it on the graph. You may be right at that point. And so, you know, it's up to you to figure out if that applies to you at all, okay? Okay, so that's the summary, okay? Let me get back in here. That's a summary. So let me address some of the comments that this fellow, primarily him, I've got a couple more comments in there, but I'm going to address primarily his because he at least took the trouble. And if he has an opinion, he has an idea, he has a theory, and he writes, then I usually try to address these issues if I think they're relevant. And the reason I think it's relevant in his case is that I think he represents more or less how 90 to 99% of the people out there believe or think. At least most of the things that he says. Some you may not agree with, but I think a lot of people will agree with a lot of what this guy says. And I disagree with almost everything. So that means what I'm going to say now, you're going to disagree with almost everything I say. And I'm already used to that, okay? So here goes. This fellow first, I want to address the fact that he came up with a case the other day about rats in a little island, and we were discussing how they died, and he thought it was disease. And so I made a counter argument that, maybe there are other causes out there that kill the rats, whatever, or that caused their extinction. And I like what he said. It made me laugh because he says, Bill had an issue with the extinction of the Christmas Island rat and proposed hybridization. I didn't propose it. In fact, I specifically say that I do not propose it, and he's not listening, but okay. But I like the next step. He says, if we assume that both theories have a 50% chance of being correct, and 50% of the rats became extinct by evolving into a different species, hybridization, and 50% became extinct through disease. I loved it because, he's talking about 50% extinction. I guess Mother Nature gives a discount sometimes to some species and says, look, we're only going to extinct you 50%. Germans call it an Angebot, a sales. You got to take advantage of that sales. What is it, Black Friday or whatever? So 50% become extinct, and the other 50% don't. Okay, but let's continue. He says the following. He says, you claim that we cannot avoid the same mechanism of extinction as the dinosaurs. Exactly. Man will become extinct, because of famine due to economic collapse. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Good. He got that part right, I think. Okay, the real mechanism of extinction is not the famine, but the thing that led to the famine. Yeah, I agree, but to some degree. In other words, we're talking about cause versus mechanism. Those are two different things, okay? And I don't think he had it right there, okay? What was the economic extinction for the dinosaurs? Well, it could be an asteroid, geological event, disease, etc. And, again, this guy's apparently not listening. I don't know how many other people are in the same boat and they're not listening either. But, I made it clear that, here are the possible scenarios for the extinction of man that people propose. I showed this the other day. And, they follow essentially the biblical version. You have your pestilence, your war, and your conquest. And, the biblical guys, they could not figure out stuff like catastrophes. They didn't really think of what happened in the past. They didn't even know there were dinosaurs or anything like that. Even though they came up with one catastrophe, which was the 40 days and 40 night rain that God rained down on us, right? But we invented catastrophes essentially, and that's very popular these days. Especially NASA is pushing a lot of those catastrophes, extraterrestrial ones, because it's in their best interest. And, we've got this climate change, habitat threats, and population explosions, right? But conspicuously, the one that I'm proposing, famine, is missing. The black horse is missing from theories today, okay? And so, I'm saying that what triggered the mechanism is the lack of food, but what triggered it, I did say what triggered it. See, he accuses me. He says the following. He says, reversal of the food pyramid is the last step of the mechanism of Bill's extinction model. Yeah, okay. The cause of that reversal is the real mechanism which Bill has not provided an answer for. I did. He wasn't listening. He wasn't listening. I did say that plants disappear. Plants disappear. Why? Because their population pyramid overturns. After millions of years, the conifers gave way to the angiosperms. You had, and the conifers, especially, you had all these gymnosperms like the cycads, cycad-likes, and Williamsonias, and they had all these plants in those days. Those plants disappeared. Most of those plants disappeared. We still have some conifers today, but the ones that the animals were eating, those disappeared, and the forests were slowly disappearing as angiosperms encroached on these forests. And today we have conifers on the planet, but they're not the rulers. Neither are the ferns that preceded the conifers. What we have today is angiosperms. People don't realize this. We don't eat conifers. We don't eat ferns. We eat what? Mammals in general. All mammals. We don't eat conifers and ferns, which were the foods of previous generations of animals. What we eat today, all mammals, including us, right? For those who still believe that we belong to the wild kingdom, right? What we eat is angiosperms. Okay, all our plants, especially the grasses. All this stuff like wheat, barley, all that stuff. That's grasses. So yeah, I did provide a cause, and the cause was the lack of the fact that the plants suffer an overturning of their population pyramid, meaning they also lost, in the process, they lost their genetic diversity. Okay, so this is part of the process. Okay, so he put another comment, and he said, Bill proposes we have nothing left to invent. Exactly. I'm saying even worse. I'm saying we haven't had an invention since about the 1980s. There's been no new invention. You say, Bill, you're crazy. We had all kinds of inventions. No. What we've done, an invention is something like a telephone. An invention is something like a car or an airplane. We've already invented those. And we invented TV, in the 1920s to 40s, we developed the TV. And when you look at a device like a cell phone, it's just an agglomeration of all those inventions. What they did is put all these inventions together in a handheld carry-on. That's what we always wanted. We wanted to be able to communicate, through a telephone, see the person, television, or watch a movie or whatever, use it as a computer. We got it. Now we've got it. But what was that an invention? Was the cell phone an invention? No. The phone existed, the computer existed, the television existed, the radio existed. All these were already out there. Okay, so I'm saying we have had no new inventions. In fact, if you look at the list of inventions that are being registered, which has ballooned, by the way, we have more inventions being registered at the patent office. But if you look at them, they're all cosmetic. They're like, instead of one was type of beer, and they call that an invention. No, it's not an invention. Those are things that make people money, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's an invention in the sense of inventing something new. That's not new. That's beer is beer is beer is beer. One is a little more bitter, another one is less bitter. That's all there is. Maybe a different color or whatever. Beer is beer is beer is beer. And so that's not an invention to say I invented a different kind of beer. No. So I don't consider those inventions. The fact that you made your car red instead of blue does not change the fact that it's still a car. That's my point. Okay, computer's been around. I think that was the last real invention, and after that, there's been no invention. But anyways, that's my take on that. The arrogance of that statement is mind-blowing. I propose we are only at the start of the journey to unraveling nature's mysteries. We have no idea about consciousness, space, time, etc. Oh my God. There is, for a guy who is awed by today's technology and just swamped with information, all this is just mind-boggling, okay? We have no idea about consciousness, etc. Okay, there is so much we still don't know that we have incentive to keep going for at least another few millennia. Oh my God. Another person put a comment there, robots will fill the needs. People have this idea that robots are going to run the world, or we're going to invent ourselves out of our bodies, essentially, because what we're going to be doing, we're going to invent robots. Robots are going to be doing everything for us. We have this society that some people are thinking about or imagining. And here are some of the people who are doing that. Okay, I'm sorry, wrong one. As always, I get something wrong. It's this one here. These are the futurists. Okay, and And these people propose, again, that we're going to live forever, essentially, or they don't talk about extinction. One was Carl Sagan, guy I used to follow very strong because I like the guy a lot, you know. Today I just can't even take him seriously anymore. Carl Sagan's died for me. And you got these other guys, Ray Kurzweil and Nick Bostrom, Michio Kaku, Neil Tyson, and Brian Greene. All these people talk about future. And they have this idea, most of them do, and I don't know if all of them subscribe to this, but I think most of them do, either in secret or in public, okay? And the technological singularity, the point at which technology starts growing exponentially, primarily because we have the robots doing the thinking for us. We have these android cyborgs, computers, and all this stuff will develop technology to unimaginable levels that we cannot even imagine today. Okay, that's their notion. Okay, and here's Kurzweil's take on it. He's one of the guys that is obviously proposing this. Okay. And he says the following. He says, the singularity occurs as artificial intelligences surpass human beings as the smartest and most capable life forms on the earth. Technological development is taken over by the machines who can think, act, and communicate so quickly that normal humans cannot even comprehend what is going on. The machines enter into a runaway reaction of self-improvement cycles with each new generation of AIs appearing faster and faster. From this point onwards, technological advancement is explosive and cannot be accurately predicted. What a world, huh? But this is what these people believe. They believe that somehow, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we haven't had an invention in the last 40 years. And these people talk about the technological singularity, where we're going to invent so many things. That's just unimaginable. And the first problem I've got with that is that, even assuming that's true, manufacturing is dying. Manufacturing is becoming a smaller and smaller percentage, not only of GDP, but of labor. And so what are they saying? We're going back to manufacturing? Manufacturing is going to become 85 to 90% of our economy again sometime in the future. We're all going to go back to blue collars. Is that what these people are saying? That we're going to invent something that's going to put billions of people to work because it's just going to be so breathtaking? Or maybe it's just going to put the robots to work and we just stay at home and do what? You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to get our money if we don't work, if the robots do everything? So, you know, they don't look at that. They look at this ideal society where you're in your couch potato, you're watching TV or whatever. I don't even know if TVs are going to be around by that time, you know, but you're watching television all day long, doing all this leisure stuff, traveling around the world. And who's going to pay for all that? I mean, and even worse, how do we get to that point? Which is the big problem, really. I mean, I want to know how we get to 10% unemployment, to 20% unemployment, to 30% unemployment, to 40% unemployment. We can all imagine the 100% unemployment society, even though that's impossible too, you know. But assuming we could imagine the 100% unemployment society where robots do everything, how do we get to 20, 30, and 40% unemployment without the whole economy crashing, without everybody going out there and killing people and overthrowing the governments and going on strikes and I don't know what else? Are you going to create robots in that environment? Is that what we're going to be doing? Is every person on earth going to have his own robot, slave, doing stuff for him? Are these people crazy or what? Have they got their feet on the ground anymore? I mean, these people are completely out of reality. Anyone who thinks like that. They're thinking of this, what is that? I've got it here. Give me a second. I'll put it up there. It's the famous Jetsons Society, you know? You got the cars running around, okay? And they're flying through the air and, you know, you have all these robots serving you. You press the buttons and everything gets done in the house. Beautiful world, right? And you have Rosie there. She does all the food and the dusting and serves you a cup of coffee or whatever and scratches your back. Even takes care of the kids, okay? Beautiful world. This is what I thought was surrealistic, that there was still a family. I mean, are these people kidding me? We're not getting married. The only people getting married are homosexuals because they want to keep the tradition and because they want to make a point. But the rest of the world is not getting married. We're getting divorced. We're becoming singles. We're becoming solitary individuals in the big metropolis. So, the family down here, that was surrealistic, in my opinion, from Hanna-Barbera, who created the cartoon, because cannot imagine family in the future. There is no family. The family has gone from clans to patriarchal type societies to the nuclear family, mom and pop and a few kids, and today we even don't have that anymore. It's dying. That's why we're not having kids anymore, and you can't have kids anyways in the city, in an apartment. So that's why we're not having kids. That's the big picture. And if you look at that big picture, all this nonsense, that the Jetson society that people dream out there, they simply don't have their feet planted on the ground. It's nice to imagine and fantasize, but come back to reality, please. Anyways, here's another issue that I brought up, and that was that, can trade save you from death? And I had these questions. Can technology compel women to have children? Can consciousness make you avoid death, or growing old or whatever? This individual tried to address these questions, and he did a lousy job because he didn't understand the questions. And here's the first one. This is the issue of trade. Okay, and I'm saying, can trade save you from to make you live forever? Essentially, that's what I was asking. He answers, I can trade medicine for food, weapons for. He can trade for anything. It's the food that keeps you alive, not the trade that keeps you alive. And again, I'm talking about biology. I'm talking about your personal. I mean, if you trade, will you live forever? That's the question. Biologically, will you live forever simply because you trade? And the same goes for some of these other issues that I was bringing up there. Let's see if I can get this thing up there. This one was second issue was the technology. Will technology compel city women to have more than 10 children like in the old days? I mean, will we increase population because of technology? I mean, is this something we can do something about with technology or with consciousness or with trade or whatever people want to throw in there, which as far as I'm concerned is irrelevant? So technology will not compel women to have children, babies. Okay, for at least he agrees with that, right? But he says, let's look at reasons for having babies in the past. The reason for having babies is to pass on genes, ensure some survive, look after you when you get old. Okay, that's retirement, right? And now we have taken care of all those problems. So all these reasons have been eliminated by technology. We are cloning, or at least in the beginnings of cloning, so we're going to be cloning people, right? So we're going to reproduce them in a different way. Hygiene medicine ensures 99% survival of babies we don't produce, right? So it doesn't matter there. Technology ensures we don't need assistance as we age, right? We have retirement, so we don't need the kids to do that anymore. So he's saying we don't need any babies anymore. And I wonder how many people out there agree with him. I'm sure that there must be lots of people who think in the same way. Here's the other one. Third one was consciousness. Let me get this in there. Where did I put it? Here it is. Sometimes these get stuck here. Okay. Consciousness help you avoid growing old. He didn't understand the question. Again, I'm talking about I'm talking about death. I'm talking, what do these things have to do with extinction? And so the fact that you have consciousness, or versus animals supposedly don't have consciousness, even though I discussed that the other day, does that mean you're going to live forever because you have consciousness? That's what I'm asking. What does it have to do with death, with biology, with extinction? And so all these issues that I'm raising have to do with that, with extinction, with death. So that's the context. Please try to understand before one of us dies, okay? Here's the other one that I asked him. He answered that one as well. He says, I asked, is going into space going to prevent you from pooping or urinating? Is that going to change anything? Are you still going to be an animal even if you go to space? And he says, no and yes. Oh. And he said, going into space will not prevent you from pooping. Okay, thank you. Okay. But as human, if we go into space, we need to be in suspended animation. I think this guy is in the suspended animation. We will not be pooping or we become cyborgs. No need to poop. This is what these people believe. I think he really believes in what he's saying. Okay, I really do. And it's just, for me, it's incredible that some people are so far, they get their education watching Hollywood movies and they think this is the future. This is the only thing they dream and think about. And these are the conclusions to which they reach, okay? And here's the last one, okay? No, there was another one. Hold it. Let me see if I can get it here. This one is the one I wanted to show. Okay, let's get this one really out of here for a second. And he says the following. He says, well, I asked him, can the ability to change our environment stop you from sleeping or eating? I mean, those are all vital biological type processes. He says, no and yes. Again, he said, we have changed our environment more than any other animal on earth that has ever existed, but we still need to sleep and eat. Well, thank God he recognizes that, right? There's this Indian fellow says he hasn't eaten in 40 years. Yeah, Gramps, yeah, I know how memory goes. I feel the same way sometimes, like if I haven't eaten in 40 years. Well, it says, however, as we evolve beyond Mother Nature's rules, we still may not need to sleep and eat. So he's thinking again that we're going to become some kind of cyborg or android or who knows what. And he says in that case we may not need to eat and sleep or any of these. And for me, it's just unbelievable that there's an individual who really believes this stuff. A grown, I think he's not a baby. I would think he's a little older than 10 years old, right? But he actually believes in all this stuff. And I'm wondering how many people out there really believe that this is going to take place. So his final point is that when the economy collapses, money will not be accepted and there will be no incentive to produce food. Why will the economy collapse, Bill? Okay, we are growing at an exponential rate. What will stop this economic growth? Well, again, we have economic growth. We don't have it exponential anymore. We had exponential in the 19th century, not now. Right now we're growing arithmetically, and that's going to die down. We can't grow forever, partly because we have no demand. We're not creating demand. Demand means people, and we're not creating people. You don't create people, you don't create future demand. Car company makes its projections based on what it's going to sell next year. It hopes to sell more cars next year more expensively or have more profits per car. And it turns out we're not selling cars because there are not enough people out there to buy the cars and not enough people with disposable income to buy the cars either. So you get to a point where you don't sell cars because the population is not increasing. And if the population were to continue to decline to the point where you have fewer births and more deaths because the old people at some point have to die, so that you get into that other part of the curve when it goes downwards, assuming we can get to that other side of the curve, right? Without dying immediately, you're going to have less demand. You're not going to be selling cars. And because of that, you're going to kick people out into the streets, and that's going to be more unemployment and et cetera, and less disposable income, less cars being bought, less cars being manufactured or needed, et cetera. It's a cyclical thing. It's the opposite cycle of what happened in the 19th century, where we started inventing new stuff and they sold like hotcakes because everybody wanted one. Today we want them, but we can't have them. There's no disposable income, no jobs. Okay, so we got a different situation, and people don't seem to realize that different ages, first, were deterministic. They could not have been avoided. And second, that because they are different ages, you can't apply the history just like a cookie cutter on that and say, oh yeah, we've been through crisis before, we've had depressions and recessions. No, no, in the future we might have a different kind of recession and depression that we've never had before, because we are in a different social situation, social and environmental and economic situation. Okay, so here's the one that really got me. This is someone else who put this comment in there, but I liked it because essentially this is the notion that most people have out there. Okay, and especially all the narco-capitalists, all the anarcho-capitalists, I call them narco-caps, free willies, you know, these people who believe in free will and don't believe in deterministic processes. And he says less food will make the prices go up, 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 and someone out of self-interest will find a way to produce something to make some money. Aha. Okay, so this is essentially what the whole, I mean, you can put the whole thing in that sentence right there. I think he summarized it well the way people think. That's the Smithsonian notion of the wealth of nations, that people pursuing their own self-interest move the world forward. Okay, and that's what he's saying here. Essentially, he's saying, someone will feel the niche if potatoes are $1,000 a pop. Someone will go out there and produce potatoes and feed the world. That's his solution. He's convinced that's the way it works. It's always worked that way, right, in his mind, and so that's how he thinks. And so here's the first question I'm going to ask, okay, regarding this. And let's see if I can get it up here. Where did I put it now? I don't know why these things get stuck. It still gets stuck. Okay, here it is. And it's, can we live without trade? Can we live without money? If trade were to die tomorrow, right? Can we live without trade? Okay, and you might say, well, is that possible? In other words, people don't want to answer that question. What they want to do is skip that question and say it'll never happen. And I'm not asking whether it will or will not. I'm saying, can we live without trade? It's a yes or no question answer, and not one that says, well, it'll never happen, so I'm not going to answer that question. Okay, keep that in mind. Please hold on to that thought. Here's one fella who answers the following on that question, and that's why maybe it's important to answer that question. Okay, see if I can get it here. Okay, and he says the following. He says, if everybody just does their freaking jobs, we don't need money. Okay, so not everybody believes that you need money. Okay, here's one fellow who doesn't believe we need money. Okay, do we need money? Can we live without money? Can we live without trade? Well, these people say it'll never happen, so we don't have to answer that question. So that's their answer. And I'm saying these people, the freewheelies and so on, they never heard about the planet long time ago known as Omni trade. Have you ever heard of Omni trade? Well, let me tell you the story of Omni trade, okay? And give me a second here to set it up a little bit, okay? Because I got so many of these, I want to get them close. So give me a minute here. Just a minute. See if we can get them all in a proper sequence here. Way at the bottom. So where is it? There's another one. And one more. Okay. Let's see if I can tell you the story of what happened to the planet known as Omni trade, okay? And it goes something like this, okay? In a land far, far away, long ago, known as Omni trade, there were two great land masses separated by an ocean, the Mare Nostrum, okay? And this is what the planet looked like, okay? And the western region had a population of about 100 million inhabitants and was solely dedicated to agriculture. The eastern region had a population of 10 billion, 100 times as much. Their business activity consisted solely of manufacturing and commerce. Okay? The entrepreneurs of the East would trade goods and services with amongst themselves, right? And their economy thrived because they all believed in free will and self-interest, right? And they had renounced violence a century earlier, saying, we're not animals, we are omni traders, free will anarcho-capitalists. So they got rid of their governments and began to do the individual thing, entrepreneurship, okay? And, well, they traded across the border, okay? They had their river boats, they had these barges and ships that would carry goods from east to west and west to east. The Easterners would exchange goods and services with the Westerners, which were mostly their parents and grandparents, older entrepreneurs who had bought the rich Western agricultural lands and settled there. When you retired, if you were successful, you went west. Okay? The ships and the barges would cross the Mare Nostrum back and forth, bringing necessary goods to both sides. But then one day, a big catastrophe took place, an act of God. Okay? And this is what happened. An enormous volcano erupted in the middle of the Mare Nostrum. Mountains appeared that reached all the way to the sky. They separated east from west. The two continents were physically separated. The Easterners had much to trade, but were isolated from their source of food. Okay? So you see what happened here. They had an interruption, okay, of their flow of food. And so what happened was, the Easterners had much to trade, but were isolated from their source of food, the Western region. They couldn't grow food fast enough to satisfy demand locally. The entire east side was mostly asphalt and concrete. It would take months to grow food again, even if they applied their best efforts and technology to the problem. The 10 million Eastern omni traders quickly discovered that they were still animals. They needed food to stay alive, and food was what they didn't have, even if they traded their most prized possessions. Many starved to death. Others quickly rediscovered their animal instincts and reverted to their old natural ways. They became scavengers and predators and cannibals in the asphalt jungle, until no one was left. And those on the western side, the old folk, they just lived out what remained of their days. They were too old to reproduce a generation of their own kind. Little bedtime story. Yeah, people can't believe that they can be isolated from food. They say trade, 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 trade. But even in these days, there's a distance between the source of food, where it's produced and where it's delivered. And, that might be a problem. People think that they're always going to have food upon the table. But for sure, if you don't have food, you die. So food is something to be taken seriously for anyone considering an extinction theory. And it turns out nobody even bothers thinking about it, because they say it's never going to happen. Why is food going to disappear? Well, here I gave you a scenario where food can disappear. It doesn't disappear. You're just isolated from it for some reason, from physical or geographical reason. You get separated from it. Can that happen? Well, again, it's food for thought, for people to think. You don't have to agree with me. I'm saying our economy is going to collapse. The global economy, the man's artificial economy, as I call it, is going to collapse. We can't grow forever, partly because demand doesn't grow forever, partly because population doesn't grow forever. And when population levels off, demand levels off, you have less demand, and companies begin to merge, which is what you're seeing out there. They kick out employees because they have these economies of scale, and those people have to find jobs in the service industry, which is about all that's left. And services don't produce wealth, things. I showed you the other day the idea, well, here you can see it in the picture between the east and west. Let's see if I can find it here. I think it's this one. And you'll see that the east side is all, it's got skyscrapers, and on the west side all you have is farming land. Okay? So, we have this situation more or less here on Earth. This is the situation on Earth. We have two regions just about everywhere. Now, will that stay forever? Well, I don't know. All I'm saying is, as population declines, we're going to have less to sell or less to buy. There's going to be less demand. Because of that, companies will close their doors, kick more people out into the streets. They become unemployed. They do services, and services is not wealth. The way you can see it there in that picture is that, if you have this bird's eye view and you look at a farmland, you compare it against the city, you can tell which one is wealthier, which one has more construction. You don't see services in either place. All you see is what's there, what the physical structures. And in one case you see food, in the other one you see buildings. And it's very hard to get people in these days who are born in this world to even understand what I'm talking about, because they think, oh yeah, I know what's out there. Well, do you? I mean, do you understand the consequences of what's out there? Of what would happen if suddenly, food starts running out? Where are you going to get your food? Are you going to go to the local supermarket? Where are they going to get their food? Well, someone's going to fill in the blank, fill in the niche. That's what the capitalist narco-caps are saying. And the problem with that is, again, that's only as long as you have money, as long as people believe in money. And at some point, the economy is going to collapse. Government's debt is going to go out through the roof. Money is going to be worthless, and money is only used to pay salaries, essentially. And it's those salaries that keep the economy going by buying things that go back to production, etc. It's a circle. It's a closed loop circle. And all you have to do is interrupt that circle somehow, meaning that you devalue money so much and you kick so many people out into the unemployment line that pretty much you have the few workers maintaining the many thus unemployed. That's one situation. And then the other thing is, there was a time for over 90% of human history, if we talk about humans living now for 200,000 years since the species was created, that's the overall feeling out there, the number that's given 200,000 years that our species has been around. We had no trade. There was no trade in the upper Paleolithic. But some people, you got some paleontologists saying, oh yeah, they traded seashells, for here you had the Neanderthal prostitute, swinging her purse, and collecting seashells. I mean, I don't know what these people have in their minds. No, there was no trade in the upper Paleolithic. We invented trade, commerce, in the Neolithic. And so just like we invented trade, hey, we can destroy it just as well, because it's a creation it's a human creation. And people say, well, we do it for self-interest. Individuals have self-interest, but corporations, they have self-interest, obviously, as well as government. But an individual might be willing to produce food for himself. Corporations don't produce food for themselves. They produce food for others only because of money. That's the self-interest. The self-interest is not the food to feed you to make you healthy or be alive. No, it's the reason they produce food is to make money, to make profits. So it's a different self-interest to keep yourself alive than to make profits for the investors. Anyways, that's my take on that, and I wish all of you a Happy New Year. That's in a few days. And we get into 2020. How long are we going to last? Are we going to last to 2030? Well, that's food for thought. That's for you to think. And yes, please factor in that you may run out of food. And if you run out of food, what are you going to do about it? You're going to grow potatoes starting today and wait 3 months for them to grow? Are you going to defend that garden against all predators that come near you? Your neighbors wanting to share in your bounty? So keep all that in mind. We'll see you on, on Sunday? And if I don't see you on Sunday, which I think I will, Happy New Year. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.